Simon & Schuster Audio presents an Inner Traditions audiobook, Revelations of the Ruby Crystal by Barbara Hand Clow, read by Matthew Duplessie. Part 1, The Sibyl of Cumae. Chapter 1, Rome. On a soft and aromatic April morning in the city of layered secrets, Sarah strolled down a small street south of the Piazza del Popolo. Strange movements to her left caught her eye. In a deep square pit below the street level, something odd was going on. She stopped and looked down into the pit, where white marble columns rose mysteriously amid scattered stone blocks. Surely it wasn't a new building site in the midst of ancient ruins. She noticed a bronze historical plaque to her right and scanned it eagerly. It read, quote, "Ancient foundations of an important early Roman villa with significant mosaic floors, circa 150 to 50 BC, protected by the Roman Antiquarian Society. See the Antiquities Director, Dr. Alessandro Sanelli, for tours available on Tuesdays." Unquote. She was relieved to see it was a protected site. But what was that movement she had noticed when first walking by? Peering more closely into the layers of fallen stones, she discerned moving colors: gold, black, gray, and stripes. Cats. A dozen sleek, flashing cats. How odd. An ancient bell rang to call people to Mass in the church down the street, but Sarah barely registered the sound. She was mesmerized by the strange acrobatic cats and their flow of moving color. They jumped up on the rocks to fly from ledge to ledge, and then froze, ready to pounce. In the center of all this movement, a sleek, muscular black cat gripped a brown rat in his jaws, biting deeper and deeper into its neck. Without ever looking directly at this central cat, the other cats were fixated on the prey clenched in his jaws. Switching their long, snake-like tails, they shared the murder. "I suppose they want him to play with the rat, to kill it slowly," Sarah thought. She was right. The black cat bit into the back of the rat's neck just long enough to stun it, and then he slowly passed it back and forth between his long-clawed front paws. He was grinning. The other cats, a golden tabby, a gray-striped Abyssinian, a steely gray Persian, a dirty and mean-looking white cat, and a scrubby orange cat, circled in closer to watch the show. Sarah recoiled. They're like leering Romans watching the lions torture Christians in the Colosseum. Completely engrossed in the sacrificial ritual on the ancient hearth, Sarah suddenly felt a man's presence on her right. She tightened her grip on her leather shoulder bag, preparing to move quickly down the street. Simon Appel had been about to cross the narrow street to revisit the historical villa site for some last-minute details for his latest article when the young woman caught his gaze. Her lithe body was outlined invitingly in a black wool miniskirt. Knee-high light brown suede boots over black tights showcased her athletic legs. Her upper body was shrouded in an ivory tunic, but still he could see she had broad shoulders. Long, wavy, dark brown hair with red highlights, his favorite, streamed down her back. She must be Celtic. He crossed the street silently and came to stand next to her, scanning the plaque he had come to read. He sensed her tension at his sudden appearance, and before she could move away, addressed her. "Excuse me, madam, do you speak English? May I tell you some things about this site?" His words, spoken in smooth and well-educated English, stopped Sarah. It had been a long time since anyone had addressed her in English. He sounded American, like her. And since it was daytime and there were a few people walking quickly by on the way to Mass, she let her body relax. She didn't look at him, although his presence felt commanding. "You're guarded, as you always should be in Rome," he said, "but I couldn't help but notice you seem to share my interest in this site. It goes right back to one of the most fascinating periods in early Roman history, when there was a lively Greek pagan culture in this region. Archaeologists believe this may be the house of Cumae." Sensing by the tilt of her head that he'd captured her attention, he continued, "The mosaics are especially interesting. They have many unusual esoteric symbols that have not been officially identified." She turned to look at him and saw a vibrant young face. He looked intelligent with sunken cheeks, a strong jaw, and a slightly hooked, well-formed nose. Large, clear, deep brown eyes flashing with sapphire lights dominated his face as he smiled. As she took all this in, her intense green eyes captivated him, watery as if she were in another world, maybe in the bizarre cat drama going on down below. Caught slightly off guard, she flushed a delicate light rose tint. All this passed in seconds, but it was recorded in the consciousness of both. This fated meeting on an ancient street on a crisp April morning in Rome was full of meaning. "I'm Sarah," she said, "Sarah Adamson." "Sarah," he repeated. "Sarah, what brings you to Rome?" "I'm a student from the University of Birmingham, the one in England, not the one in Alabama. Are you a student too?" "I'm a freelance journalist," he said. "My name is Simon Appel. I'm working on a story about this villa for a local paper and also some stories about the Vatican for the New York Times." He paused, holding her gaze. "You know, I've been up since 5 a.m. and I'm starving. Will you join me at my favorite trattoria? I'd love to chat with someone in English." That was something Sarah normally would never do. But she'd been in Rome for more than 3 months doing research in the libraries and touring ancient sites. She was lonely. She was also very tired of struggling to communicate in her limited Italian. "I'd love to join you. It would be nice to talk in English." They walked away after she took one last glance at the battle going on down below. The cats were taking turns pummeling the hapless rat, a scene that reminded her of the Christian mobs stoning Stephen while Saul stood by and watched. At the trattoria, Simon hung up his green corduroy jacket on a hook as Sarah pulled her sweater over her head and shook out her hair. She felt him look her over, his gaze seeming to linger on her breasts, which she knew were large for her tall, slender frame. She hunched her shoulders reflexively. She was relieved to be wearing a high-necked, long-sleeved white cotton blouse, typical attire for the Vatican Library. They sat down at a small wooden table covered with a red-checked vinyl tablecloth. "How did I get myself into this?" she wondered as she slid onto a wooden bench. "I usually know better." Red table wine arrived immediately, and she realized he must be a regular at the trattoria. "Are you a grad student or undergrad?" he asked. "And why are you studying here in Rome?" Relieved to think about something other than his eyes on her body, she replied, "I'm getting my PhD in patristics, the study of the early church fathers of the years 150 to 400. Many of my sources are here in Roman libraries, especially in the Vatican Library. I finished 1 year in England, and I have to go back periodically while I write my thesis. I hope to write about Marcion of Pontus, the first heretic refuted by the Church Fathers." She smiled ruefully. "Sounds dull, doesn't it?" "Not at all," he replied. "I've long been fascinated by Marcion." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "You've heard of Marcion? Forgive me, but even here in Rome, most people have never heard of him. Have you researched him for your work?" In a way, as you may have guessed from the name Appel, I'm Jewish. When I was an undergrad at Williams College, I discovered Marcion because I was trying to understand the source of anti-Semitism. The blue blood New England judgment at Williams was excruciating, so different from where I grew up, Brooklyn Heights, New York. I just wasn't prepared for it. My parents thought I might be unhappy at Williams, but I had a full scholarship and was thrilled to have my college education paid for. He shook his head. Soon I realized I'd gotten the scholarship as a token Jew on campus. Anyway, while seeking the source of anti-Semitism, I ran right into Marcion, since theologians say he was the first anti-Semite. What really grabbed my attention was that as one of the first bishops, he didn't want the early church to attach the Old Testament to the newly forming Christian literature. But as you know, they did it anyway. Then he was mostly lost to history. Sarah couldn't keep the smile from her face. Simon was the first person she'd ever met outside of moldy academics that knew anything about Marcion. But he is a Jew, and I'm Catholic, she reminded herself as her body heated up with the thrill of finding somebody to talk with about her most passionate interests. She had been raised to be deeply suspicious of Jews. If her father, a strict Boston Catholic, knew what she was doing right now, he'd be furious. She had better just enjoy lunch and get out of there fast. Well, I'm amazed that you've heard of Marcion, she said. I came across him because I was interested in the formation of the New Testament canon. It wasn't until I read Marcion that I thought about how demeaning it was for the early Christians to call Hebrew scripture old, just because their scripture was newer. I couldn't agree more, Simon replied heatedly. I've always thought Marcion had it right. The Jews should have retained their own wisdom literature and practices, and the new Christians should have written whatever they wanted about their Christ, or Jesus. Christianity should have been a totally new religion. So my ancestors probably agreed with Marcion on some level. Their scriptures were their sacred culture, their heritage. Maybe they felt Christians were stealing their scripture to legitimatize their new religion. If Jesus was the Christians' teacher, a divine visitation from God, then why would they need anything more? Simon spoke from a burning inner pain, ignited by his sneering, cold, rich college classmates who treated him like a pariah. Even now, more than 15 years later, the disdain and rejection burned him inside as a core wound. His education at Williams and later Harvard had, however, given him the ability to write and speak incisively about Judeo-Christian issues in a way that never insulted non-Jews. He was still deeply intrigued by the anti-Semitism lurking under the surface of Christian culture. Sarah sympathized greatly with Simon's experience of anti-Semitism. Her studies had brought her face to face with the pain Jews suffered over the centuries from Christian judgment. Listening to Simon talk while watching his passionate facial expressions, she could feel his body. Somehow, she actually felt the sensation of his thigh muscles tightening as he recalled those days in college. I wonder if he's married. Feeling heat in her pelvis, a new sensation, her mind wandered. Her cheeks and chest warmed as she watched deep blue lights flashing in his dark eyes. I like watching his fine hands and taut arms while he talks. I wonder if it's the red wine. Thankfully, a marvelous plate of antipasto served with crisp garlic crackers arrived. They dove into the vegetables soaked in rich Italian olive oil. Admiring her piece of toast slathered with capers, mushrooms, garlic, and shaved Romano cheese, she replied, "Well, I'm Catholic, from an old Irish family in Boston. Until I encountered Marcion's point of view, it never would have occurred to me that the early Christians stole the Hebrew Bible from the Jews. But after studying the sources, I can see Marcion was really afraid the newly emerging religion would lose sight of the authentic Jesus if it was too attached to Judaism. I often wonder how our Christian beliefs would have evolved if they hadn't attached the Hebrew Bible to the Christian canon. When I was 12 years old, I was given a Bible. Being a typical Catholic girl, I'd never read the Bible, but I dove into it right away, thinking it was strange that the Old Testament was 1,000 pages long. Yet, the New Testament tacked on at the end had only around 200 pages. I wondered if a mistake had been made and they'd given me a Jewish Bible. I forgot this until just now. Hearing Sarah describe her strong religious background, Simon found himself wondering if she'd ever had sex. He could tell she was trying to control strong, energetic responses to him. She's eating a lot to calm her body, and she seems to get cerebral when she's having erotic feelings. She must be very inexperienced. Tasting his wine thoughtfully, he put it all together in his mind. Maybe she's younger than I thought. Maybe only 21 or 22? He blurted out, "Sarah, how old are you?" He was embarrassed at the way the question had just slipped out, but Sarah responded without skipping a beat. "Oh, I'm 25, but with the studies I've chosen, sometimes I feel like I'm 90. I just can't get rid of my obsession with the possibility that early Christianity took a wrong turn. I am so delighted to find somebody else who is interested in what people actually believed during this crucial religious turning point. In my studies, 99% of what I have to focus on is scholarly arguments by writers who don't think about what they actually believe. Well, I think Marcion may have been on the right track in his day. Yet, when you get into early church dogma, the first thing you notice is the big Marcion cover-up directed by the early church fathers. There were and are a lot of powerful people, Jews and Christians, who didn't want anybody to hear anything about Marcion of Pontus. I don't know what they were afraid of. By the way, Simon, did you know in Marcion's era, there was a significant teacher named Apelles who agreed with Marcion? He smiled at her obvious excitement. Really? I imagine you and I could stay here all afternoon, but unfortunately, I have to get back to the office. Can we have dinner sometime soon and get more deeply into Marcion? As soon as the words popped out, he realized how much he was hoping she'd agree. Sarah hesitated only a moment. Okay, but on the condition that we share the expense. Go Dutch, as they say in the States. Of course, he responded, and they exchanged emails and phone numbers.